Hey, what's up, Midwest Gaming Classic 2022? Woo! You guys still hanging in there? Yep. All right. Thank you for joining us for the last panel of the first day of MGC 2022. And I couldn't think of a better way to finish up the day than my two buds here. Returning champion Jordan Davis.
Hello.
Coming back. And a new challenger, Nathan Tolbert.
How you doing?
Thank you guys for coming on. So I wanted to end the day by having a bit of a homebrew discussion, right? I'm sure we're at the gaming convention and there are a bunch of people, I'm assuming there are a bunch of people who are playing all your delicious homebrews and all the other homebrew developers who are here and wondering, how do I do this? And what's the best way to get into NES development?
Absolutely.
And since you guys have been doing this for a while now and collaborating on great games such as this game Project Sword, which I played and actually is very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, I know people can Google these things, like how do I get into NES development, but I think there are probably maybe life lessons that you guys have learned that maybe aren't spelled out in a Google search. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, if somebody is interested in getting into NES development, what would be the first step or the first couple steps to take to make that dream come into fruition? Mm-hmm. So, Nathan, I'll start with you.
Well, I would say the first couple steps really depend on what you want to do. There's so many ways into the kind of community and hobby. I was a professional programmer, and I'm like, I want to learn the technical stuff and dive into the programming. I can talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
But I think Jordan, for example, came in from the art and the sound perspective. There are people that have come in, and say, hey, I don't have this skill or that skill, but how can I promote it? So I think really a lot of it depends on what skills do you have and what skills do you want to bring into the table, and the route into it is a little bit different. I don't know if you want to...
No, absolutely. I think really NES represents an era of video game development where games broke in from more kind of rock star developer solo programmers like you had on the Atari into small teams of developers. Like in Japan, Konami and Capcom were pumping out NES games in small teams. So there are a lot of aspects to an NES game compared to a simple game like an Atari game. So you have so many departments, like art department, sound department, promotion. There's all sorts of aspects that go along with game development. So just determining what your interest is kind of the first step, I would say. Because there are members of our homebrew community that are just into promotion, just into marketing.
Oh, really?
And doing paintings for covers.
So a homebrew PR team,
exactly.
Ready to promote.
But doing illustrations for cover art. We need artists, we need musicians, we need programmers, we need marketing people. We need basically all the people that do all the things that would be required to run a Nintendo company in 1986.
Okay, gotcha. And what is, is there a one particular repository or a forum where people would go? I'm sure it's pretty fragmented and there are a lot of places people can go. But is there to meet up with potential collaborators? Is there one that you would recommend over any other?
There used to be maybe a little more centralized. Now it's a little scattered. If you follow developers on Twitter, there's kind of a network effect on Twitter.
Yes.
There's two sites, nesdev.com.org, NesDev,
yes.
forums, and Video Game Sage, that both people come to those,
yes.
talk and communicate, and both of them have Discords, which are a great place.
Yeah.
So really what I would recommend, whether you're coming in from the art or the programming, is immediately get into the community, because if you're just doing this by yourself and you're like, hey, I'm awesome, you can make some progress, but there's a lot you probably don't know, and a lot of people that are in the community that really want to help you get moving and help figure it out.
Yeah.
Whether that's development and you're like, hey, where do I start learning to code for this machine?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And people will be like, hey, go check out this website called Nerdy Nights, it's awesome. Or go check out this resource. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're making that effort, people in the community are going to be really supportive. Or if it's art, if you come in and you're like, hey, I drew this, I want to be involved,
Yeah.
then people will be like, hey, that looks pretty cool. And before long, somebody will reach out and say, hey, do you want to make a game with me? If you're
Absolutely.
The one thing, as far as starting mistakes, the unwritten things, is not
That's what I wanna know. Yeah.
Right. Not going in being like, hey, I've got this idea for a game, and I'm the idea guy, and I need you all to help me make it. Like, that's not going to fly.
Yeah.
As long as you're coming in with a skill and saying, here's what I do, how can I get involved? People are going to be excited and work with you, I think. I don't know if you want to...
Absolutely. No, I think really once you've determined your starting point, going in to find where those other people are. Like for me, coming in from the art music angle was finding where the artists are, see what the artists are doing, finding where they're sharing their work, as well as finding where the chiptune people are. Like who's talking about chiptune, who's actually making soundtracks for games, who's making chiptune just for fun, who's talking about the hardware, where can I learn things. And I knew that because obviously my personal story with NES Dev was coming in through the music angle. Sure. So finding chiptune and then getting excited and using that excitement to snowball into the next aspect, which was
you were originally a composer.
Yeah, I mean that's how I came into the scene.
Yep.
And I actually, once I got in a little bit and got comfortable making NES music and stuff, I kind of saw that there was more of a need for pixel art than there was for musicians. I find a lot of the programmers end up doing a lot of their own music, which is great. But I was like, I really want to make NES games. How can I be valuable? So picking up pixel art was a thing for me to kind of plug myself in a little more. Yeah. And just make myself more valuable to other developers. Yeah, exactly. And through that, find other projects that I want to work on. And find other people that I want to share my work with. Because the network of making software for old games is kind of the most important part.
Absolutely.
For all of us, making it. Making friends who love this hardware as well. Making friends who love the games that inspire our games,
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, don't go barging in through the door and say, I got this idea. We're going to make this game about this fish.
Yeah. I mean, if you came in with some drawings and being like, here's a game I'd like to make, here's a tool that I've found to make some pixel art, how can I make this for the NES? If you said it like that, that's a very welcoming... a lot of us love to help people that come in with those questions.
Right.
Like, here's what I'm trying to do, who's got advice, who's willing to help me figure this out.
I mean, you guys are very amenable to a lot of things, especially coming on our podcast, us lovable yahoos, so thank you.
We love to talk about this stuff, so, spreading the gospel of NES, just evangelizing what we love about this is kind of what we're here for,
So Nathan, you said you were a professional programmer prior to dabbling in the homebrew thing.
Yep.
How long have you been doing that? And
so I started when I was a kid. Started with the Apple II my parents bought. Started making programs with BASIC.
Sure.
I would try to make games because that's what I wanted to do. They were terrible. So all my life I was like, dude, I want to make games. And then I studied computer science, became an adult, realized the game industry is kind of a toxic place.
Yeah.
Wanted kind of a more normal day job.
Sure.
But I was always like, how can I get in and make console games? And then in about 2004-ish, the Game Boy Advance homebrew scene really took off.
Okay.
And it was one similar to NES where there was a good community, lots of tools, lots of documentation. So I was just like, let's do it.
Fantastic.
So you get on one of the forums, you start reading, they point you to guides, you start reading. You do have to be able to do your own homework. There's a lot of go read this guide. And if you ask and just people to teach you, they're going to get a little fed up.
I suppose, yeah. So being a bit of a self-starter,
right?
Kind of.
So you read through the guides, you figure it out, and you start making stuff. My first one was the paper game dots where you connect the dots and you make squares. And I made that to see if I could do it. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Let's make a game.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then from there, it was Game Boy Advance. Now I want to learn Atari, but it's the same process. You find the community, you dive in.
Sure.
You read the documentation, and then I started doing Nintendo, and the community there is even better. So that's why I've been doing so much Nintendo work. The community is awesome.
Has there been one platform that you've enjoyed working with the most? Is it NES, or do they all have their own?
I enjoy the community part of the NES the most.
Okay.
The platform itself, they've all got pros and cons. I like them all.
Sure.
So.
Gotcha. So I'm curious. Project Sword, which we're watching right now, is this your first collab together?
Yes.
Yes.
It is. Okay. How how did this come to fruition? Like, how did the genesis of this come to be, and how did you guys get to be working together on this specific project?
It actually started right here at Midwest Gaming Classic.
Really?
Yep, 2019 was my first conference that I attended.
Okay.
And I was kind of lurking around the forums, the NES Dev forum, the Nintendo Age forum at the time, which has since shut down. But I had been looking around playing ROMs that were available from homebrewers online, getting interested because I had ideas to make my own games, but studying the hardware, knowing what the limitations are, kind of cataloging my ideas, what's possible, what's not possible with this hardware. Once that process kind of like settled in for me and I decided I want to do this, one of my first real steps as a developer was coming here to MGC and walking in the Nintendo Age room at the time. And because I was following a blog by an artist in Sweden called Frankengraphics, who was doing graphics on a game called Halcyon, which is a project that Nathan is programming for. So my ground zero was walking into the Nintendo Age room, seeing Nathan displaying Halcyon, seeing Frankengraphics graphics on screen, and being like, oh, this is where hello, it's me.
I want to do this.
I'm here.
Right. You complete me.
Exactly. Right. So then chatting up Nathan and just like, hey, I like to do music. I've been studying chiptune. I want to do graphics. If you ever need somebody, get in touch.
Yes.
Yeah, then I think a couple of years later, my kids and I were reading some novel series, and we were like, oh, it'd be cool to make a game based on this. And eventually this game has nothing to do with the novel series, but
sure.
I was kind of starting on that and thinking, oh, this would be a fun side project, and I could use an artist. And I know Jordan's not doing anything right now, or maybe you're doing 100 things right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was like, Jordan seems available. So
I was doing both of those things.
I was like, hey, do you want to do art for this? I got this idea, and he's like, yeah, sure.
Oh,
that's kind of what.
Yeah, I was ready to jump into specifically a collaboration. I know that you mentioned like, hey, would you be willing to do art for this? And I think I specifically came back, well, I'm looking for a collaboration.
Yeah.
If we could build something together, because I'm looking to do more of like a audio-visual presentation because I do sound and graphics. So it's like, if you want to build something together, let's do that. We'll put together a package. And, Nathan mentioned the types of games that he was looking to build, and one of them was what he described as a twitchy platformer, kind of based on Batman.
Yeah. You need that wall.
Exactly.
The wall jump.
Yeah. You need to hit the wall, and then you need to get over.
Yes. And I did test out the wall jump, and I can confirm that it feels great.
Good.
So
if you're able to do the wall jump, you'll be all right.
Yeah,
Yep.
I found it in a panic, and it saved me from dying, and then added a whole new element to the game.
I saw, Tyler was falling down a corridor and discovered it by accident.
Right.
I was
Oh,
like,
nice.
it's the best condition.
this is a thing. All right, now I got to start
Let's
over.
But Jordan mentioned the collaboration, because I think that's one thing that's interesting, because you can do it a few different ways. Sometimes the programmer will be like, I just want to throw $1,000 over the wall, and you make me my art for my game.
Right.
And that's one way to do it, and that's perfectly legitimate. Or sometimes you're doing what we're doing, or there's some other guys out there, Kevin Hanley is working with this guy, Retro Brews, I can't think of his name, John.
Pika Brews.
Yeah, Pika Brews, sorry. And it's more of this, collaborative design. So I think it was really fun to have not just my own ideas in the game, but hey, let's work on this together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think most of my other projects were more, I'm making a thing and I get some stuff from the artist.
Subcontract.
Right.
The work. Yeah.
And for me, especially coming from bands and musical situations, the communal aspect of creativity is kind of inherent to me, So like bouncing ideas off of people. It's like there's a time that we're riffing, we're throwing ideas around. Some don't work, some do, and we follow the ones that work best. And that's part of what I really like about NES development is that there's always this kind of, yes, you can work on things as a solo thing, but the community is collaborative. Some of these projects are collaborative. And a lot of this process is really collaborative with our players. I know that Nathan said like the games industry has a pretty kind of sleazy reputation. There's a lot of exploitation and stuff, but in our little niche scene, we talk to our players almost every day. And because they're part of our community, and they hold us accountable when we make stuff that isn't good or isn't up to theirs. Well, that's not entirely true. Like they don't yell at us.
Right. Sure. People are supportive even if it's
exactly.
not great.
But they tell us what they like, and we, I think we all try to make games that the homebrew player community wants to play, you know, and I think I enjoy the cyclical aspect of inspiration there.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, is that one trait that you need to have? Is to have like some kind of like some sort of like thick skin, or be able to handle constructive criticism?
Well, yes
the
and no.
player
I
base?
think you have to. I think everybody that makes games has to come to terms with the fact that, you know, this is interactive media, and you need to be able to understand that you're not going to be the person experiencing this ultimately.
Yeah,
you know,
people will consume it.
Yeah,
have
you're,
opinions.
You're kind of setting up the foundation for other people's experiences. You know what I mean? You're creating a sandbox is it's such a cliche term to use in game development, but you know, you're creating the canopy for all of this stuff to exist in people's imaginations.
Sure.
You know, one of the great things about NES and playing it back in the day is that there weren't necessarily accurate representations all the time in pixel art. So much of it is just based on your imagination and how you interpret the events happening in Super Mario Brothers. We all played them communally with our friends and neighbors and talked about what these power-ups meant to us, and if it's a sandwich or if it's a piece of chicken, or you know, everybody names power-ups whatever comes to your mind because no one reads the manual.
Yeah.
I do have a thought about your thick skin, though, that going off. One of the nice things I think about the community, though, is people are more interested in your personal journey in making the game you love than the game has to be perfect.
Yes.
So if you're building a game that you're like, I'm learning, and this is the thing that I'm excited about, and you throw it out there, for the most part, everybody's going to be super supportive.
Yes.
More so than even if it was a great game, but you're kind of like, hey, I'm the best, and this is, you know, it's really got that community atmosphere where even if your game's not the best, people are going to support you because this is your hobby and fun, and we want to see each other grow in that.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I would think most rational people would understand that you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into this product, you know, or whatever you're creating. Can I just ask a really rudimentary question? I'm sorry, but what tools
that's a great question.
You use?
That's like the best question.
Yeah.
Because I've always been curious. Do you, like, for programming, do you just have like, I don't even know if Microsoft makes Microsoft Studio anymore, or are there other, like, you know, there's like NES Maker, but I don't know if that's like, you know, programming light.
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what do you use?
So,
what would be a good? How would somebody who wants to do this?
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
A beginner can use NES Maker and really dive into the scene quickly. It lets you do a lot more pointing and clicking and get a game up and running. So you're talking about how do you get involved? That's one way to fairly quickly. I want to make an NES game. If you want to, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'd let you finish, but I can speak more to that in a second, being an assets person, because NES Maker taught me how to animate, which was a really powerful thing moving into other tools just for making game creation. Like the software, NES Maker user interface is really good for artists and musicians to like put your image on screen. You know, like that's very empowering. And for me, like getting my first products up there, the products of my labor, like getting my first sprites on screen and seeing stuff move around, like that was a really empowering moment for me as a developer. And I think software like that really bridges the divide between like artists and the technical aspect of having a cartridge that plays your image in your NES console.
I could imagine. Yeah,
absolutely.
The first time you see a moving or just a static image that you created on screen
on your Nintendo, it's like life-changing.
Yeah, in programming, it's like called the hello world moment. But for an artist, that's like an actual like, oh, hello, it's my art or my music on screen. You know, for me, being a chiptune composer, like hearing my NES music coming through my TV rather than my headphones on my computer, because my computer makes sense. I can make it do tool things, but my NES has always been off limits to creativity because of that lockout chip that that Nintendo put in there. So hearing the NES play my ideas was like, wow, this is a really cool feeling.
Right. Yeah. But then, going off of the NES Maker, I think once people get a little bit more heavily involved, you want more flexibility. NES Maker kind of puts you in a bit of a box.
Sure.
So, like, what I will use is just a text editor. Like, I'm old school, so I use VI. You get a text editor and a compiler, and you're writing assembly code and C code, and you compile it. You usually use a good emulator like Messen It has a debugger built in, and you compile and you run it on there.
Okay.
So for the coding part of it, I mean, it's really pretty basic. You're just writing code in a text editor and running it. As far as assets, it really varies. Each team has their own preferred tools and assets.
And assets meaning art and music, basically.
Yeah.
And art on the NES consists of background layer and sprite layer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a really popular tool called Nes Screen Tool, and Jordan can talk more about that. But
Love
it helps you draw art that fits into the NES restrictions.
Yeah,
so a lot of artists use that.
Oh, okay.
It prevents you from making any mistakes, or it prevents you from putting anything on screen that the NES can't do.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it fits you in the box of
flash
the way.
a really angry red exclamation point.
It just won't let you do it.
It just won't let you do it. It's like, why won't this work? Because that's not how the NES works.
Nice.
It makes it very simple to understand what you can't do. And personally, that's where I started. Is just started creating pictures from. I started recreating scenes from Legend of Zelda because those are very basic pixelated, pixel art.
Yeah.
So I started drawing that in Screen Tool, and then that's basically all I needed to get started. Learning how tile maps worked, and then learning how to place them on a name table, which is what a screen is. Yeah. And that was kind of off from there.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, really, you can use any image editing. Some people use Paintbrush. Any image editing tool, as long as you understand how the Nintendo, what the limitations are.
Yeah.
The real trick is the programmer has to build, and we all end up doing this slightly differently, build scripts and tools that take all that data in and get it into your game format. And that always takes some work. So.
I bet.
Yeah. And there are a bunch of good programs for that. Pixel artists like to use a program called Aspirite, which I think is a paid program, but that's a really good animation tool. People can use programs, basically all you need is a bitmap, right? So you can use MS Paint, just break it down into the resolution of the NES and just start drawing, and then you can eventually get that into an NES screen. Although, I would recommend using the proper tools like NES Screen Tool, just so that it's a little more intuitive once you get to the point of actually programming it.
Excellent. Yeah.
But with assets, additionally, there are all sorts of great ways to make chiptune music as well. If you're a musician to get started, FamiTracker is a wonderful resource for creating chip music.
Okay.
And that, I've been using that for 3 or 4 years now. And that, that exports a text file that we can import directly into our NES build, into our ROM file. So basically, FamiTracker is a one-stop tool for creating music and sound effects.
FamiTracker?
FamiTracker.
Okay.
Fami like the Famicom.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's another one called, and I'm going to forget now, it's called NES Studio, Fami Studio.
Yeah, there you go.
Fami Studio. And that one is maybe a little more friendly to approach as a beginner because it's set up in not as a vertical tracker, but it's set up as a horizontal piano roll. So you can actually just kind of bar out and tab out your notes.
Right.
Oh, that's cool.
And more intuitive
Mario
to music.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're a musician and can, tab out a few notes, you can be flying on that program in no time.
Sure.
FamiTracker is a little harder to get the basics of, but it's a lot more granular.
Okay.
And you can really get very intricate with the sound design.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now I don't feel like such a moron asking that question. I now know some tools that it could potentially use.
Right. Those are good recommendations.
If I wasn't going to the bar after MGC,
well, good thing
I would go home and use those.
Good thing you have a recording of this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about Project Sword for a little bit here.
Absolutely.
And before we talk about the game itself, the design of the game, did you go into this with any kind of design document? Do you just say, hey, I want a game that scrolls every which way, and I want a wall jump, and based on this franchise, and go?
That's closer to how it is. I don't like formal game documents for Nintendo development because they're no fun.
Yeah.
It's good for there's a boss and he's putting together a big team.
Yeah.
But for a hobby project where we're just bouncing ideas back and forth, it's really closer to what you said. Hey, I want it to feel sort of like Ninja Gaiden, sort of like Batman, but more scrolling.
Little Castlevania visually.
Yeah.
Kind of pulling elements from everywhere.
And then Jordan will be like, oh, can we add this? I'm like, oh, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I was playing this game over the weekend. What do you think about this? Oh, that's cool, too. Or, no, we've got too many sprites happening here. I don't think it'll work.
Right.
we just have those conversations. And, as long as either of us are flexible enough to be like, rather than being like, no, this is the way it has to be, we know that there are reasons that things can't happen on the NES, and that conversations need to be happening to get over the problem solving needed to make a good game.
Sure. Yeah.
So just pulling influences together. Like I said, he said Batman and Ninja Gaiden. One of the things that we really wanted to take from Ninja Gaiden is the speed. Because it's such a quick game.
It is. Yeah.
I realized that one of the differences between Batman and Ninja Gaiden are very similar games, but Batman, all the enemies have hit points.
Yeah.
And Ninja Gaiden, they do not, which means that game is a lot faster because of it. Because you're just flying, taking out enemies left and right.
And it's been a while since I played the Batman, but I do remember Batman, the main character, Batman.
Yep.
Just felt
Batman from the game Batman.
Yes, thank you. Jeez, it's been a long day. The Batman had a little more weight to him than Ryu. Yeah.
He did. His punch has a wind-up, so his elbow comes back when he punches.
And his jump does too. He kind of crouches. And it's a slower game.
But it felt good.
It did.
Sunsoft did it.
It did. I agree. I love everything about that game.
Yeah.
When we started this project, I liked the way that game looked, but I was always a little frustrated by it.
Sure.
However, in an effort to really do the research on Project Sword, I went through and I beat Batman, which was the best feeling.
It's a hard game.
It is a hard game, but after a couple of weeks, I just loved the play control of that game. And I loved the wind-up, and everything just makes such perfect sense in that game.
Yeah.
However, our other design goal was speed, like Ninja Gaiden.
Right.
And we knew that adding a wind-up, adding a wind down from a jump, because Batman jumps, he does a little crouch when he lands.
Yeah.
And you need to plan in for that when you're playing the game. So we wanted to kind of take out a lot of the stuff that would slow you down as a basically a speedrunner.
Gotcha.
Because part of the great experience of Ninja Gaiden is learning and then just running it.
Yeah, once you get good, you don't stop.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and Ninja Gaiden is such an empowering feeling to play. Once you learn the game, you can just whip through it, and it feels good. It feels good to be a ninja.
Yeah, I think you guys definitely nailed the speed in this one, because I died several times, as you guys saw. But once you learn an area, I was able to kind of breeze through knowing where the hits were going to come from, and
right on.
I did feel really good.
Oh, good.
Until I got to the platforming, and that took a couple times.
Yeah, but I saw you learned it, and then if you were going to play it again, I bet you would fly through those sections.
Oh yeah,
which is the beauty of Ninja Gaiden.
Tyler.
Thank you, Tom. I believe in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. The game did feel great. So how long has the game been in development?
It's been a little over a year now.
Okay.
And by a year, we kind of had a slow start. It took me 3, 4, 5 months to even put together the main run animation for our character.
Oh, yeah.
It was we both had projects going on, so it was kind of a thing that we were dabbling with on the side.
Sure.
And then I would say in the last 6 months, we kind of hit the ground running with the pieces that we had built up in the first kind of slow section. And and then once we had the kind of quote-unquote deadline of presenting this weekend at MGC, then it was like, we got to, kick this in.
You got together on Thursday, put together the game.
Exactly. We stayed up all night.
Right, just crammed. I get it. Yeah. So is there a release window, release date?
When we're done.
When you're done.
We sound like Blizzard. It'll be done when it's done.
Good.
I would guess.
I like that. Yeah.
We haven't even really talked about it. I would guess at the point we're at now, we can make a bunch more levels, and at the end of this year, what is this, 2022, have the game mostly wrapped up. Then you do testing and you do figuring out packaging, and so it probably won't be released until
all the post-production stuff that needs to
sometime
do, all the
next
making
year.
a trailer and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
I think with the pace that we've been working on the beginning of this year, that we could probably finish it by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And actually, that
because we spent so much time building the engine for the demo, the game itself is mostly completed. Now we just need to build out the content.
Right.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Making maps, making more guys, making more enemies.
Boss fights, all that stuff.
Yeah. I hear you. No, it felt fantastic, and it leads me to another question, probably a rudimentary question. When a game is finished, you want to release it. Not just send it in ROM form to your buds. As far as like manufacturing, I'm sure you aspire for physical releases because Space Raft.
Absolutely.
How is that process? Getting your game into an actual physical cartridge?
There's a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
Some of the guys that are here watching actually make boards, and you can buy them from them and assemble it yourself.
Yeah.
So some people will do that. They'll just buy the material and they'll sell it, make it themselves, sell it themselves.
Yep.
There's guys that have small publishing houses that basically you can send the ROM off to them and they'll get it all together.
Okay, yeah.
And they'll sell it for you, for a cut. There's some of the bigger companies that are actually, semi-well-known companies that'll do the same thing. So it really depends on what scope, how closely involved you want to be in the process.
What's your preferred method for Project Sword when it comes out?
We haven't talked about it really.
No, and I think we have
that's a good time
to
if you guys
discuss
wanna
it too.
hash
I
it
think
out.
really what we're doing right now is just building up momentum and getting people talking about it.
Right.
Sure.
'Cause, I think that this game probably has a lot of appeal with people, and really all it is just spreading the word that we're doing it. Because I think in a year from now, our options are going to look a lot different than they are today.
Right.
So, that's going to be part of the post-production process. Definitely 100% cartridge-based release.
Yeah.
Like, that is on the table 100%.
Yep.
As far as everything else, there's all these new avenues for getting retro games into people's hands.
Okay.
Selling the ROM file on itch.io is a really popular way to sell, or to get the game into people's hands, but also, wrapping it in Steam as well and selling it on the Steam platform.
Yeah, digital distribution.
But now, doors are being opened for Switch ports and for Xbox Store and PS and PlayStation Store.
Yeah.
So our community is kind of moving out into the bigger world of indie games. And, if there are options for this game to kind of get it out there, I think it would be fun to see how well it does.
Yep.
I'd like to see it translated into some languages and see how it does overseas as well.
I couldn't see why it wouldn't do well. It felt really good. No lie. That's not just me being a shill here at the convention.
Well, that means a lot to us. We really put a lot of work into that, and appealing to fans of the NES, like the people like us that play NES games and enjoy them. Like, we wanted to make a game that feels good to them. You know what I mean? So,
right. Absolutely.
This is, I think, the game that we would want to play if we were on the other end of that cycle. Which is the great part about our community. We really get to make our dream projects because we're doing it on our terms.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, guys, I could sit here and probably talk to you for another 6 to 8 hours. Just all about this.
We could talk about all the day.
Exactly. My wife gets sick of hearing about it.
You've been very generous with your time. I just want to say
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming up. Tyler, did you have anything else for the gentleman?
Yeah, I think I asked you upstairs, but who... I get a little bit of Princess Bride. Inspiration there. Who was that? Because it's one of my favorite movies. So
I think what started was, I mentioned originally it was kind of interesting to be based off this novel series. And I was trying to describe the character I wanted. And I said, sort of like Wesley the Man in Black from The Princess Bride. And I think that got the gears turning.
And Jordan's like, as you wish.
Right.
And so then he drew, our first boss is basically Fezzik. He throws the rocks. He looks like Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
So Jordan sent me that, and I was like,
saw
oh
that
yeah,
similarity.
let's do it. That's perfect.
I love movies, and I love how much inspiration early video games got from movies, like just direct inspiration. I'm talking like movies like Escape from New York made how many, talking about Snake Plissken and Metal Gear, like all these things. All early game development is just like movie references. There's something so satisfying about referencing movies that we like in the games that we're making. Right. So it's the same kind of tribute, I think, that happened back then.
Yeah, I think so.
So
so it's not a Princess Bride game, but we're definitely stealing some things.
Yeah, that's definitely leaning into it. And it makes sense to do kind of a fantasy setting. Like, we're doing a ninja game in a fantasy setting.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the closest correlation we have is The Princess Bride.
Sure.
I've been watching other swashbuckling films like the Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, like other quintessential sword fight movies, just to kind of see what things look like, how people move around, that kind of thing. Right. And The Princess Bride is still number one. Yeah. All of those, it's the best.
There are worse franchises to ape from. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much. What does Midwest Gaming Classic hold for you for the rest of the weekend? I'm assuming you're up in the room, showing off this game, all your games. Are you doing anything else? Are you doing any other panels this weekend?
I'm doing a DJ set 1 p.m.
on the
main stage on the 3rd floor. I'm going to be DJing chiptune from my NES console.
Nice.
So I'm trying to play some mostly homebrew stuff, like friends' music and stuff that wouldn't be like, this is my opportunity to play deep cuts for people, you know, and to kind of like spread the word about like the good music that my friends are making on this console.
Awesome.
And on top of that, I'll be playing some classics as well. Probably slip in some Batman, some Shadow of the Ninja, some Castlevania 3, that kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah. If people wanted to find out more about the game, where do they go? Where would you have them?
So we're both in the Video Game Sage room right now, and that's a room sponsored by videogamesage.com.
Okay.
I did put up a big development thread on the website, videogamesage.com, which has links to both bitethechili.com, your website, and then both our Twitter threads as well.
Okay, great.
Really, Twitter is probably the best
Yes.
way to just get constant updates. We both kind of post stuff as we go.
Okay.
Yeah, and being the artist too, I have stuff that I can post almost every week. So I try to put up stuff so that people can follow along.
Sure. Why don't you lay down your Twitter handles?
So my Twitter is 0000Jordan. Not great, but I chose it years ago and I'm stuck with it. But my nickname there is Rafternaut, which is all related to Space Raft, and Raft Labs is what I'm calling my kind of development house.
Sure.
Which is, for graphics and music.
Right on. Nathan, how about
Mine's
you?
Nathan Tolbert, Nathan, and then Tolbert, Tolbert.
Okay. Great. Well, gentlemen, it has been fantastic to have you guys on.
I appreciate you letting us talk.
pleasure to be
This
here.
is a lot. This is
honored.
really enlightening and a lot of fun, and you guys are great guys. So if you happen to be watching us right now, go visit these guys up in room 203B.
Yes. Video Game Sage.
Yes, Midwest Gaming Classic. Otherwise, go check out Project Sword and keep it locked at Hair of the Dogcast. We are podcasting all weekend long here at Midwest Gaming Classic 2022. Good night and have a great one. All right. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.